Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm back to this webinar, live streaming of a very interesting and important topic, which is how to take care of your back and how to manage your back pain at home. And if in any case you have to go to the doctor, what are the situations? And if you're going to a doctor, what could be the possible treatment options and the results? So it's going to be very interesting. See, what we see in society is that if someone gets very severe back pain, or the pain is radiating to leg, and you have to go to a doctor and the doctor suggests surgery, there is an immediate scare. Am I going to actually get my spine operated? And the reason for this is that the results that we normally see in and around us in the society are not very good. The patients, they have had their back pain, they went to the doctor, they were operated, and they eventually landed up onto the bed. This scare is true because till few years back, the technology for operating the spine was not very good. Everyone was trying to do a procedure which that surgeon would know. What actually happens in spine is that we first have to identify what is the pain originator, because there are many parts of the spine which can cause pain. So these we can do by clinical examination, we can run some tests, and we can identify which is the point which is actually causing the pain. And then for each pain, there are multiple treatment modalities which are available. If we use the right treatment modality for the right point of the pain definitely is going to go, and there is no side effect also. So the talk basically is around all this today. If I talk about the structure of spine, the spine is like we have got certain blocks on each other. I'll show you a model of the spine. The spine is seen something like this. And if we see it, so this is the front side of the back, and this is the back side of the back. We see it as a cross section. This is the point from where the spinal cord travels like this. And at each point, there is one nerve which comes out. These are the vertebral bodies, which are the blocks, or these are, I would say, these are like the bricks, and these are the discs which are there. So if you see it here, if there is any pressure which causes herniation of the disc onto the back, it causes compression of the nerve which is coming out from here. Now we go to another example. If we press the bodies like this, so we have to imagine that there is a water-filled balloon which is present between the two bricks. So if we press this in the vertical direction, the pressure in the balloon-filled water will spread all around equally. But whereas if we cause some pressure from one side, which is this is the front of the body, so if we cause some pressure like this, what is going to happen is that the balloon is going to get bulged on the backside. Then if the pressure is high, there will be some leak of the fluid. So this is what is the prolapse of the disc, what is called. And if there is this leakage of fluid, if you see from here, like this, so if there is leakage of fluid here, it causes compression onto the nerve. This we are going to see in some videos also. So going back to what I was talking, whenever you find a situation where you have got pain in the back, it could be something like that's a pain in the back which is radiating to the leg. There could be severe back pain in elderly females, and this usually happens if the female patients, if they have got osteoporotic fracture, and this is the fracture in the spine, and because the fracture is unstable, it causes very severe pain in the elderly females. There might be a situation where a patient who is usually an elderly, he is comfortable when he is sitting, but he feels some numbness in the legs or pain while walking. Gradually, as the time passes, this distance of walking decreases till the point that the patient gets pain or numbness even in the sitting position. Then there could be a situation where there is pain in the back, which is not much during the daytime, but it is very worse at the night. There could be a pain which is on one side of the midline of the back, or there could be pain which is continuous. So I have just tried to enumerate what could be the symptomatology of back pain. So all these different types of pains you could experience. Of course, if there is a history of fall or trauma, and then there is associated history of pain in the back, that could be because of a fracture in the spine. So all these symptoms, if you identify along with back pain, that means there is some disease in the spinal cord or in the vertebral bodies. So first is how to prevent back pain. See, the incidences that statistics say that in 80% of the patients at any time of their life, they would experience back pain. That simply means that if we have a population of 1 CR, almost 80 lakh people would have experienced back pain during one time or other time of life. So it's a very common thing. Now, if you have to prevent that back pain, I give you an example of bricks and the water-filled balloon inside. So if you want to prevent back pain, the golden rule is, as we see here, that your ear, your shoulder, and your hips, these three things should be in the straight line, and this line should be perpendicular to the ground. In this situation, what happens is that the pressure on the disc is uniform all around, and the chances of it herniating or causing any pain is much less. So we go to another image. This shows that how you should stand. So this is the proper way of standing: straight neck, level shoulders, feet directly below the hips. And if we slightly punch forward ourselves, that is not the right way to stand. Now, most of us are doing desk jobs nowadays. The biggest mistake that we do is that while doing our desk job, either we are writing, talking to someone, or doing some work on the computer, we are not sitting properly. The right way to sit is that you have to push your back just adjacent to the back of the chair, and you have to pull the chair to the level that your chest is touching the table. Now, what happens in this situation is that your body is sandwiched between the table and the back, and there is very little scope that you will bend forward. Because as I said earlier, that if you bend forward, although your line might be straight of the ear, the shoulder, and the hips, but if it is not perpendicular and we are bending forward, this is going to cause some abnormal pressure onto the disc. This is a wrong way to sit. Another wrong way to sit. Wrong way to sit and work on the computer. Once again. So this is good. You're sitting straight, so this is 90 degree and perpendicular to the ground, and the computer screen is almost parallel to the line of the vision. But if you're bent slightly, this is not a good posture. So this is, again, that your arm and wrist, it should be at some angle, the wrist should be supported, the viewing distance is important, and the thighs should be parallel to the ground and should not be at certain angle. If you have to sit in a chair at home or doing some work, this is the best way. And what I normally suggest is that the lower lumbar region, it should be in direct contact to the back of the chair. Because if that happens, then there is very little chances that if suppose your upper back is like this, upper chest is like this, and you sit like this pressure exerted on the back is going to cause some strain on the ligament or the muscles and will cause back pain. Very wrong method to sit. Now here what is happening is that this is the back which is lying at an angle, and because of the strain, there will be a strain on the muscle or the ligament. Similarly, on sitting on a small stool, this is a typical posture which is bad. If you have to sit on a stool, this is the best posture to sit. If you have to stand for a long period of time, the best thing is that you should stand with one leg folded at the knee, so that one leg is straight and the one leg is folded at the knee. This gives a very gentle curve onto the spine, and if you have to stand for a longer period of time, this is very helpful to prevent back pain. Most of the ladies who have to do some household work, they have to take care that if they have to do all these types of works, the best thing is that they should, if they have to wash utensils or wash clothes, that should be on a platform, and they should not do all these while sitting and stooping or bending forward. The second thing is that if you are working in the kitchen for a long period of time, two situations can be used. First is that if you are standing, you should keep one leg flexed and raised on a stool, and you have to shuffle between the two legs. And if it is possible, you can have a high stool or a high chair where you can sit and prevent this pain to the back to happen. And mind it, this is particularly true if you have to stand for a longer period of time. Now, if you have to wear shoes, the best way is to sit on a stool, bend your legs, and then wear your shoes. Because what we normally see is that sometimes that we sit on a stool or a couch or a chair and we bend forward to tie our laces or slip on our shoes, which is not the right way to do. Now, this from here I come to a very important slide. What we have seen is that if we stand straight, the pressure on the disc is uniform and there is very little chance that there will be a slipping of the disc. Now, if we understand this particular slide where we measure the pressure inside the disc in different normal postures of our day-to-day life, what we see is that if we are lying straight, the pressure measured in the disc is 25. This is all in pascals per square inches. If we are lying on our side, the pressure increases to 75. Now, this slide of mine will answer all your questions. What are the right positions to sit and what are the wrong positions to sit, stand, and do some work. So lying straight, the pressure is 25. Lying on the side, the pressure is 75. If you are standing, the pressure within the disc is 100. Now, in the standing position, if you slightly bend forward, so in this position, what you see is that although your shoulder, neck, and the hips, they are in the straight line, but because of the bend, the pressure on the disc is increased to 150 from 100. So this tells you an importance of why you should be standing straight and 90 degrees from the ground. Now we add some weight. The person is lifting a weight also. The pressure normal from 100 has now increased to 220. The rule here is that if you have to lift any weight from the ground, the best way is to sit down, lift the weight, and stand. But for certain reasons, if you have to just bend at your hips and lift the weight, the best is to keep the weight just close to your body and it should not be far away from your body. Because if it is closer to your body, because of the physics and fulcrum, the weight exerted on the disc is less. And if it is away from your body, this weight exerted on the disc is much more. So I'll just repeat, from 25 in the lying position to standing, it is 4 times. And if we now talk about sitting, so it is 140. Now this is very surprising. We usually think that if we are sitting, the pressure on the disc would be low. But based on these studies which have been done over so many years, what we see is that if you're lying straight, the pressure is 25. It is higher while standing, which is 100, and it is much higher when we are sitting. So we have to be very conscious that when we are sitting and working on our office tables, we have to be very careful that the back is in the straight line and we are not bending forward. Because if we are bending forward, the pressure increases to 185. So compare yourself, you're standing, it is 100, but if you are sitting and bending forward, it's 185. Standing and bending forward is 150. So this is the point I was talking, that if we are tying our shoelaces, we are actually increasing the pressure in the disc to 185 level. So, and if we are sitting and lifting the weight, the pressure increases to 275, which is very high. Now this chart of the calculation of intradiscal pressure is very important. If we are doing any of our day-to-day activities, we just have to keep in mind what will be the intradiscal pressure at that particular time so that there is no herniation of the disc. Now this is, along with this, they have done the calculation. In figure A, what we see is that this person has bent forward and is trying to lift a weight which is far away from the body. And this is the intradiscal pressure rise that we see in this particular person. But if the weight is same, the person is same, the person has sat down and lifted the weight which is very close to the body, what we see is that the intradiscal pressure the rise is much less. So this chart is very important to understand that what happens to our body, what happens to our disc in different positions of life, and all these positions here are usually extrapolated to our day-to-day activities. Now, if we get a MRI of normal volunteers, almost 20 to 36% of the patients would have disc herniation seen in the MRI. But would that mean that all these patients need treatment? No, that is not going to be there. As I said earlier, that if you have got pain in your back, which could be of different types, pain while lying down, pain when it is radiating to the legs, pain associated with trauma, or pain associated in old age because of a fracture of the spine, or pain while walking, and this distance gradually decreasing. For all these symptoms, the first thing you have to do is take some painkiller, take some muscle relaxants, and do rest. Walking definitely is allowed. When you are resting, I have told you that we have to take care of the intradiscal pressures, what is happening to your spine. Walking is allowed, but it is said that if you walk, you should walk straight and do not walk till the time you get, so that you do not overexert or strain your back. Climbing stairs is also allowed, but you have to take baby steps, meaning thereby that for each step you have to put your right and left foot on each step always. So we don't have to climb like normally we fast climb the stairs. So we have to do some baby steps if we have to climb the stairs. So painkillers, muscle relaxants, rest as much as possible. Walking is allowed, but take care that it should not strain your back. Climbing up the stairs is allowed, but we have to be careful. We can apply some painkiller gels, and which can be preceded by fermentation. Now, next comes what is important is during this time when you are taking care at home, what we normally see in our practice that some of the patients, out of pressure from the society, they go to some local quacks. They use some manipulation, kneading, and all these stuff. Majority of the patients that come deteriorated to us are because of this. See, when a trained spine surgeon is seeing you, he knows what the anatomy of your spine is. He knows what the point of pain origination or the originator is. He knows what are the treatment options available. He knows what all physiotherapy should be done and what all physiotherapy should not be done. But a quack knows just needling or manipulation. And we have seen so many patients in which the disc, they herniate further, and the patients, they come to us in a very deteriorated situation. Now, if for certain reason we are not able to, the pain is not relieved, what should be the next step? There are three situations. When you can wait and if you think that the back pain is not relieving by rest and other things, and the usual time for this that we give is around 2 weeks. The walking is becoming more and more difficult. The back pain which was going to legs is worsening, or there is some back pain which is more in the night time. So these are the situations when you should go and consult your spine surgeon, because then he has to find out what is the cause of the disease. Then he has to go to find out what is the level of the disease. Then he has to go to find out what is the best treatment option available to you. But then there is no urgency or emergency. So these are the situations where you should, at your early convenient time, go and see a spine surgeon. This is back pain not relieved by rest, 2 weeks walking, which is becoming difficult, back pain which is going to the legs, back pain which is more to the night. There could be a situation where this pain is associated with numbness in the legs, or it is associated with weakness in the toes. When you walk, there is a limp, or when you press your toe, it is difficult to press because there is some weakness in the toes, or the pain is very severe. So we rate our pains between 0 to 10. If it's upwards of 8, 9, or 10, then this is the time when you should go and meet the spine surgeon early. There's an urgency because all these symptoms are signs of a dying nerve. It is the crying nerve which is telling you go and meet the doctor urgently. Now, there are certain situations where there is an emergency. You have got back pain which is related to your legs. The pain is worsened, and now you are feeling some numbness around your perianal area. There is difficulty in passing urine. You have got hesitancy, and you feel that you are not able to pass the urine completely. There is constipation, and if there is weakness in the limbs after a trauma. So these are the situations where you should not wait for anything, and you should rush to your nearest or expert spine surgeon, because the reason is that in these situations immediate surgery might be required. So we are taking care of our back at home for up to 2 weeks, and if this pain is not improving, then we should see a surgeon. If there is some sign of nerve damage, which is in form of numbness, weakness, or severe pain, then it is urgent. But if there is difficulty in passing urine, there is constipation, there is perineal anesthesia, or there is weakness in the lower limbs after a trauma, that is the time when you should rush to the spine surgeon. Now, this is one of my favorite slides. Rushing to an expert does not mean this. This picture I clicked from outside the PGI Chandigarh and almost 4 or 5 months back. So if outside the premier institutions, the patients are getting their spine treated like this, I think that's not a good choice. Now, if you go to a spine surgeon, he would first evaluate you from your signs and symptoms. Then he would take some investigations which are in the form of X-rays or maybe CT or MRI. And then if suppose there is a disc disease, there are multiple treatment options which are available. It could be a conservative, which we have already discussed. It could be an open surgery, which nowadays is not a very good option to operate upon a disc. Or it could be a microscopic, endoscopic, or a minimally invasive surgery. I'm not going to any of those details. I'm just telling you small things of what these actually mean, so that you know what options are available. We want to buy a car, we normally search onto the net that what all options are available, what all things good or bad in a particular car is, then we take our final decision. So my idea in this talk is to make you aware of what all treatment options are usually available at good spine surgery centers, and mind it that if these are handled properly, there are very little complications. So it's conservative, open surgery, or something which is a minimally invasive surgery, and then the latest is the stitchless, which is a laser surgery. Now, if I talk about microscopic or endoscopic surgery, if we see this, the structure of spine that we saw earlier also, as I had shown at that time, that this is the disc which is there between the vertebral bodies. So it is L1, 2, 3, 4, 5, S1. These are the names of the vertebral bodies, the numbers. And if because of the pressure in the front, there is a prolapse of the disc, the fluid is going to leak something like this. Now, what is going to happen is that this is the normal canal from which the nerve would comes out. But if there is a compression from the leaked fluid of the disc, there is compression which is seen here. Now, the current trend of doing a microscopic or endoscopic surgery is to go from the back, just remove this herniated disc, and allow the rest of the things to heal. So this is the another view that we saw. I just show you how this view would look like. So this is what I'm showing in this particular view. So it's like this is the vertebral body, this is the canal, this is the area where the disc is there, and if the disc herniates, in this case, as we will see, this herniation is here, and when the root is going out from here, it is going to cause some compression there. So this is what we see here. This is the normal disc, this is the normal root which is going out, and this is the root which has got compressed by this disc. The weight of this disc is close to 14 grams. And if this hole is 14 grams, what we see is around 1 to 2 grams of the disc which has herniated and caused compression of the disc. In later stages, this disc gets swollen, and this is the time when the pain starts to worsen and other symptoms, they start to happen. In earlier times, what used to happen is that, see, this is the backside, and if we have to reach the disc, we would want to remove this whole bone, we reach here, and then do this decompression to relieve the nerve. It was not a good option because we are sacrificing the normal tissue. I usually give an example to my patients that suppose there's a big tree which has fallen inside a jungle. Now, we have two options if we have to remove that tree. We use a bulldozer, we just break all the trees, reach that particular point, lift that tree and come out. The second option is that we use a helicopter, we go right on the top of that fallen tree, put a hook down, lift the tree. Now, the difference between the two approaches is that in the second case, what we find is that we have not done any damage to the normal tissues. So all the trees are intact, but we have done our job. Similarly, in earlier days, what used to happen was that all the surgeries that were done would compromise the bone, it would compromise the normal structure, the ligaments and the muscles. And after compromising all these, the disc would be removed. Once this was done, the result was that the pain because of the disc would decrease, but the pain because of all these structures which were removed, that would stay with the patient for the whole of his life. So in newer techniques, what we do is that these are the instruments that we use, and these instruments are as thin as almost 2 to 3 millimeters. There's a small cut through which we pass these instruments, and there's a small nick that we give on the surface of the prolapsed disc. Using very small instruments, we just evacuate the loosened fragments, and what we see here is that after the completion of the process, the disc goes back to its normal shape, the normal structure. We have removed the extra 1 to 1.5 grams of disc which has been removed in this case. This root was already free and was pain-free, and this root, once is free, becomes pain-free. And this is the disc. This is a magnified view of the disc that we normally remove. Now, this is the photograph of the laser that we currently use. And what we do in these patients is that we identify what is the point of the pain. We insert a needle into the middle of the disc, and at that particular point, we insert a laser fiber, and all these fibers are almost 1.5 to 2 millimeters thick. We insert it into the middle of the disc. We give laser energy, and what it does is that it causes some evaporation of the disc tissue in the middle of the disc. Now, what happens is this is a large, huge disc which has increased the pressure, it has bulged out. We put in a needle into the middle, evaporate some tissue there, and what happens is that this disc comes back to its normal shape. Now, these are very beautiful procedures because the patient does not require any anesthesia. It is done only local anesthesia. The patient is seeing the procedure being done on the screens. And out of my experience, there are few patients who are lucky enough that they have had their improvement in the results right there on the operating table. These patients can walk immediately after the procedure and they go back up home after 1 or 2 days. So this is the beauty of this procedure. Now the results. As I said, that there is a scare in the public, in the society, that we should not get our spine operated. But what I have seen in my practice of 25 years is that if the procedure is selected properly and done properly, the results are fantastic. 95% of the patients who were in our studies, what they say to us is that they did not get the surgery, they suffered from the pain because they were scared of the surgery. And of all the patients operated, 95% of the patients who go home on the same or the next day, they tell to us that if the procedure was so simple, why did we not get the procedure done before? So that is the beauty of the results. Short of that, we have got multiple other options like putting some needles in the joints, putting some needles in the disc, we identify the points, and we give some local anesthesia, or we give some root blocks or steroids. And so these are the things where we have to choose between which procedure is best for that particular patient. Now, acupuncture and acupressure, they are very good adjunct to the treatment of the patients. But mind it, say I got myself trained for acupuncture and acupressure. I went for a fellowship abroad and I saw the surgeon giving some injections in the foot for pain in the back. And to my surprise and astonishment, I saw the pain relief immediately after the injection was, and it was just a local anesthesia. So it's a beautiful science. This is a Chinese science. And if the patients are carefully selected, some of these patients who are not subject to surgery or laser or any other invasive procedure, they show very good results by using acupuncture or acupressure.